Survival is a challenge that all insects are faced with every day. The danger of being eaten has existed since time began and forms part of the life of insects. That is why nature has given the different species a series of defense systems to make them less vulnerable, which have been developed over millions of years. Defense mechanisms that afford greater importance to ingenuity than strength. Fragility is one of the most obvious physical particularities of many insects. It almost seems as if nature had forgotten about them when providing them with mechanisms to defend themselves from external hazards. And yet the protection they have been given lies precisely in their own bodies, which in appearance are so vulnerable. The forest is alive, and eyes could be watching you in any part of it. In the heart of nature, that look could well be that of a predator, but also that of another being that is skillfully hidden from view, so as not to be seen by the eyes of its target. The best way to remain undisturbed is to go unnoticed. This principle has been used by many different insects with excellent results. The defense mechanisms deployed by natural selection can be divided up into two categories: active mechanisms in which insects participate, and passive mechanisms that are put into effect by the color and appearance of these beings in relation to the environment in which they live. These passive defense mechanisms have camouflage strategies that are both surprising and extremely varied. Insects do not have to make any special effort to be safe. The key to defense lies in their own bodies, ever since the day they were born. The forest is alive, and eyes could be watching you in any part of it. Nature has given the species adopting these mechanisms characteristics that enable them to improve the efficacy of the camouflage strategies. Evolution has provided certain chameleon-like insects with the power to change their bodies and appendices, which can be lengthened or expanded to make them blend into the vegetation of the environment where they live. The camouflage is often so good that only the slightest movement will tell us where they are. The importance of camouflage also extends to the insect's behavioral guidelines. Normally they move slowly, in keeping with the scenery in which they are located, and can remain motionless for a long time. This is the final proof of the perfection with which nature develops the camouflage techniques they employ. The great diversity in the ways they camouflage themselves is not only based on what these beings are like, but also sometimes on their color. In fact, many species of insects existing in damp or tropical climates tend to be green, which enables them to blend in with the foliage. Not only are they able to resemble sticks or branches, but also any object that is unattractive to a predator or even to a hungry vegetarian. Something like this leaf that certainly looks quite unappetizing. It looks like it has already been nibbled by other insects, or even worse, it could be also ridden with fungi. Not at all a tasty-looking morsel, at least in appearance. The art of imitating a leaf is used by many species. It must be admitted that this is a disguise that could fool anyone, especially due to the details at the spoiled tip of the leaf. A leaf that is really the wings of this fragile being. Ingenuity must be put to the test to be able to enjoy a well-earned grooming session. The efficacy of the camouflage does not necessarily mean not being elegant. That appears quite obvious in the case of some insects. And as we are imitating a leaf, why not do so by taking into account its most delicate details? Color, shape, veins. It's impossible to detect the difference. But the imitation of some insects is not restricted only to dead leaves, and even less so when we consider the great variety of leaves that exists. Insects know how to adapt their bodies to any of them. In fact, looking like a leaf may be safer than having a robust shield. Again, ingenuity overcomes strength. A moth with wings in a beautiful red shade. It seems difficult that such a bright shade could go unnoticed for a potential predator. And yet the moth only has to close its wings in the shape of a tiny roof for it to look like the bark of a tree. If it should be discovered by a predator, in spite of this, the moth would suddenly unfold its wings and the bright red flash would surprise its enemy, enabling it to fly away into the forest. Imitating a leaf or the bark on a tree are just two of the many techniques of nature that can be used in order to go unnoticed. The camouflage techniques used by some of these insects are not limited to merely pretending to be one of these natural elements. These species can also take on an overall resemblance with the environment in which they live. The complicity between insect and environment is such that if the latter were to change, the insects would try to imitate that new appearance. The extent to which that imitation is successful depends on all the physical characteristics of these beings, from the shape of their bodies, legs, head and thorax to their color. The ground is another element that can be imitated. A grasshopper that is apparently not threatened by any danger. The fact is that all the circumstances are in its favor. It usually lives on the ground, and its body normally imitates the colors of its environment to perfection, thereby allowing it to develop in relative peace. This insect is not similar to the ground by nature, and must pretend that it looks like it. That is why it covers itself with the aid of its hairy body. This is yet another form of camouflage, but in this case, we shouldn't be deceived, as the insect is actually lying in wait for its prey. We should not forget that it is known as the assassin bug. Few skills are as useful as cunning in hunting, and this larva is particularly cunning. It is known as the lion ant, not because it is an ant, but because ants are its food. After burying itself, it makes a trap in the shape of a funnel and waits for its prey. Sometimes the victim manages to escape, as it is not an infallible system, but the lion ant's patience is usually rewarded. When an insect eventually falls into the trap, the hunter retains it by throwing sand on it, so that the hapless prey slides down the slope of the funnel until it is caught by the lion ant. This is the same system as that used by other larvae. But in this case, the larva traps its prey by using its tail as a lasso. This is a curious system for obtaining food, and we might well imagine that nature has used its cunning to design it. The praying mantis is the best example of an efficient camouflage. It makes no distinctions in its prey. Its instinct makes it one of the fiercest predators in the insect kingdom. Furthermore, it has no doubt about eating the members of its own species if they come within its reach. The sophisticated guises it used to hunt with simply serve to enhance the legend about the fascinating praying mantis family. The bride sits dressed in white on the branch of the flower from which it takes its color. A beautiful and yet sinister image created by nature. The praying mantis family uses the most varied of disguises, and apart from camouflaging itself as a flower, it can also disguise itself as many other elements of nature, adapting its body to the most unlikely forms. In some cases, it must remain motionless for hours to blend in perfectly with the chosen surroundings. But that immobility should not be taken lightly. The predator is not resting, but waiting. And it has all the time in the world. It is also a good idea to have shelter beneath the water. Some insect species have chosen the option of taking their homes with them, consisting of a tube open at both ends. It is made of different materials depending on the species in question, and as they grow, more material is added to this safe hiding place that can only be seen when their heads and feet emerge in order to move. The so-called broken camouflage disintegrates the shape of the animal, allowing it to be confused with its natural surroundings. This is an optical effect that is achieved partly thanks to the shape and corporation of the animal. It can also be useful to break up one's silhouette. The wings of this butterfly have irregular edges, so that when it folds them it becomes practically invisible against the pine bark that has fallen on the ground. Many butterfly species achieve a perfect camouflage effect by breaking up their silhouettes. However, some insects are able to go even further. This bug lives only on thistles, to which it bears an astounding resemblance. Its well-rehearsed trembling makes it look like part of the plant swaying in the wind. Its nervous movements make it difficult for even the human eye to locate it. More proof of the perfection used by nature in camouflaging insects. Camouflaging pupae adds yet another complication. Until the time of their metamorphosis, they must remain completely still and find a way to hide that is adapted to that waiting period. They take on colors and shapes that allow them to resemble seeds, dry leaves, or buds on branches. A caterpillar and a masterwork of camouflage. The caterpillar remains completely still and pretends to be a stick by hanging onto the branch with its two false back legs and holding onto it. The effect is such that it is almost impossible to distinguish it from the branch. One need only look at this tiny creature to know that it is taking advantage of its color to merge with the plants. At the slightest sign of danger, it stops its odd movement that has earned it the name of pacemaker, and remaining motionless is enough to protect it. Mime is a camouflage technique that consists of one insect imitating another. The overall appearance of these two butterflies is so similar that at first sight it would be easy to confuse them. But they are not the same insect. This phenomenon is common in many butterfly species. The reason for it is because the butterfly being imitated has characteristics that interest the imitator. In this case, its toxicity. Predators know the insect is toxic and will not attack the imitator. Mime may also be centered on the shape and color of insects from different species. Imitating a bee may be a useful resource for a beetle. However, no one will approach it. The imitator takes advantage of the indirect protection it receives through this collaboration. It is of little consequence for the waspfly that it cannot sting. Its appearance is sufficient to ensure that no one will bother to get close enough to find out whether it is actually a wasp or not. Any observer would say that this insect is a bee. However, it is a robust butterfly that has lost some of the scales on its wings, leaving them as transparent as those of a bee, which is much more dangerous. The mime technique obviously gives rise to a doubt. Butterfly or wasp? Which is which? Insects show us time and time again that in their universe, everything is possible. Looking like a frog, a tree, a leaf, the camouflage techniques developed by nature effectively corroborate that ingenuity is often more powerful than strength. But there are other ways to avoid danger. All of them require the instinctive behavior of the animal. They are active defense mechanisms which in themselves constitute a separate world. Hiding from an enemy is the oldest safety method dictated by the instinct of all living beings. Some insects take advantage of the first crack they see to scuttle away from potential dangers. The old wives' tale according to which the earwig enters the human ear and drills a hole in the eardrum with the pincers most probably lies in this complex defense system. Hiding in the ground seems the safest method of all, and also the easiest if it is done with the impetus of some beetles. But even something as simple as hiding below the ground can be done in many different ways. For example, like the cricket. They neatly tunnel holes in the ground, but the aim is not to hide from a special peril, but to remain safe permanently. In fact, they only emerge from the surface when they need food or to reproduce using the characteristic sound of their wings. The hiding place may also be permanent. The fragile larvae of some beetles are hidden in wood and remain there until they reach adulthood. Their only function is to feed, and their hiding place, the wood, is also their food. It thus seems logical to stay there permanently, safe from predators. There are certain larvae that also hide, but adopt humus or decomposing vegetable matter as their home, in which they bury themselves completely. In the case of many adults, their food also marks the place where they tunnel their homes. Once the larder is empty, they find another, and the whole process is repeated. Making a fast escape is also a good defense. But it's always a good idea to have shelter underground. Among the creatures inhabiting the subsoil are different species of crickets that are more sedentary types. They tunnel their homes underground and stay there permanently. They grow, live, and reproduce there without ever leaving it. These creatures have many different ways to hide in the ground on which they move. However, no place below ground is as safe as the refuge of flying insects. Flying has always been one of the decisive elements in the successful existence of these creatures. A predator has little choice when, after attacking it, the beetle or insect in question spreads its wings and takes flight. The defense tactic used by the spider beetle lies in staying together. The attack of a predator is solved by allowing it to capture one, but this enables all the others to escape. The hasty procession of the bugs based on tactile and olfactory communication with their antennae is quite an unusual example of gregarious behavior in the insect kingdom, but some species of bugs often use it. They do this for reasons of safety. In the face of a sudden attack by a predator, the group starts fleeing, and this momentarily confuses the attacker. They have a slight possibility of escaping that a young bug on its own would not have. The composition that forms the external skeleton of the beetles has provided them with strong defensive weapons. The well-developed horns of some of them not only have functions related to sexual behavior, but also an effective weapon in the event of a fight, which on most occasions never takes place. The enemy flees on seeing the power of its adversary. In the insect kingdom, beetles' jaws are the symbols of force as a defense system. Another important defense system are spines. The insect walks along unnoticed. Its physical constitution makes it possible for certain species to do this and emerge with the vegetation. But that perfect disguise is also a dangerous defense weapon. The appearance of certain species in itself is sufficiently threatening apart from any defense weapons it may have. Apart from the respect imposed by the presence of this insect, the males of this species have two hind spurs that they use to stab their enemies when attacked. Their spurs are so effective that the natives of Papua, where this insect is found, use them as hooks for fishing. This insect may adopt certain threatening postures that scare their enemies, and also emit a pungent odor that frightens them away. The habitual fragile appearance of caterpillars does not mean they are lacking in effective defense mechanisms. The sharp spines that cover the bodies of certain species are a physical feature that is extremely useful for threatening their attackers. Despite their hapless appearance, caterpillars are not interested in camouflage. However, when trapped, they cannot escape. This apparent contradiction appears to be made worse by the spectacular colors that make them stand out. But in addition to using their spines, caterpillars also put their trust in the toxic appearance of their colors. Red and black, yellow and black, representing danger, representing a poisonous animal. These colors, this striking aspect could draw the attention of a predator. But the color combination indicates that it is toxic, and it would not be wise to get close to it. It knows that all other species know the meaning of that combination, and for that reason it is able to eat and move around in complete peace. Once again, the wasp, or the coloring of the wasp, lends a hand. The caterpillar feeds off a plant that contains toxic substances to which it is immune, which build up in its body and are later transmitted to the butterfly. Precisely due to that quality in caterpillars, many species of butterflies contain toxin in their bodies and also the warning colors. Curiously enough, several cases occur in which that color is yellow and black, as in the case of the caterpillar, and red and black when the insect reaches adulthood. The warning colors are an effective system that makes the insects bearing them practically immune to attacks by predators. The dangerous significance of that color combination is well known in the wild, and that warns the enemy off. And as opposed to warning colors subtly applied to defense methods, chemical defense. A bug is the ideal example of this option. The chemical components in the body of this tiny creature not only have a foul odor, but their taste is also extremely unpleasant. This is a defense mechanism that almost always warns of its presence, since its objective is mainly to dissuade. The insects know the toxic perils that lie behind the combination of these colors. Many species use one form of defense or another based on the chemical components of their bodies. And of these species, more than 50,000 are insects. Naturally, caterpillars belong to this group. They often defend themselves using the toxic hairs that cover their body. When they are touched, they cause irritation or allergies that can also affect humans. The assassin bug is a predator with a strong sting. Its potential victim is a caterpillar loaded with repellent chemicals. After much hesitation, the predator decides not to attack. It knows what the consequences will be. Each creature goes its own way. Certain pupae use similar defensive methods by segregating repellent substances, but in the event of being attacked, some make contorting movements. There are also some beetles who fabricate their own defense. Their bodies produce substances that, depending on the species in question, may be corrosive or irritant, which they store in special glands. When danger is imminent, the beetle squirts a jet of liquid against the predator, allowing for time to flee. stinging. A defense system which, in the case of bees, causes the death of the bee itself if it stings an invertebrate with soft tissues, as the sting itself is joined to the digestive tube that is torn out when the bee stings. Wasps, like bees, emit volatile substances that are instantly captured by their colleagues, which attack the enemy in a swarm. Stings are the ideal mechanisms for injecting toxins and are often great works of morphological elaboration. A great defense mechanism, the markings on the wings of butterflies. Butterflies move their wings in such a way that the markings appear suddenly, confusing their enemies. These markings on the wings of butterflies have unsuspected defensive advantages. Located in the center at the edge of the wings, they look like the eyes of a larger animal. The predator then decides to go off in search of smaller prey. In a situation of danger, the butterfly spreads its wings, and it is the enemy's turn to feel threatened by that non-existent larger animal. These are not the only elements that are used to scare off hunters. The head of the crocodile butterfly has been developed to achieve a threatening appearance. Other butterflies have extended their wings to form long tails that have a defensive function. Together with the markings, they give the butterfly an appearance that succeeds in confusing the predators, which attack the tail, tearing off a fragment, while the butterfly escapes. There are also certain caterpillars that seem to be what they are not. Strategically located at the end of their abdomens is a mask they have been given by Mother Nature to frighten off their enemies. This disguise is completed with an inoffensive spur, which, however, bears a considerable resemblance to a beak. Stick insects enjoy their protection actively and passively. Their camouflage means they are not attacked, but unexpected events sometimes arise, and then the insect uses the age-old technique of playing dead. Their instinct lets them know that a lifeless body will not arouse the interest of a hunter. And when the danger has passed, well, off they go. Certain beetles also use this technique, but they may experience problems later. Their hard skeletons make it hard for them to turn over, and they must use their wing covers again and again to return to their normal position. Ecological balance is the primordial objective of nature. For that reason, it has given insects many defense techniques which, however, are not infallible. Sometimes insects manage to avoid danger, but sometimes they don't. Whatever the order to which they belong, their diversity and beauty are always patent in the image of this butterfly. And yet in the particular beauty of these creatures, there is also an underlying purpose in the danger of extinction that threatens them. A danger that could jeopardize the delicate moment at which a butterfly emerges, considering that the butterfly is a symbol of all the creatures that claim their place on Earth. Perhaps that butterfly no longer exists, or is at that same instant only a vestige of the past. The felling of the rainforests on Earth, or the inevitable disappearance of thousands of species among these tiny creatures, all irreplaceable elements of the ecological balance. They, like other living species, run the risk of disappearing due to the ignorance of those other inhabitants of this beautiful planet called Earth. We humans. The fragile image of a butterfly sums up that danger better than anything else. The person who discovered this delicate butterfly in the mid-19th century, which he named Gracilia Isabelle, wanted to show his admiration to British loyalty by giving it this name as a tribute to the Queen of England. Little did he know that his fascination for the prodigious 3 lives in one of this being would be brutally destroyed by man hardly 1 century before its disappearance. Those 3 lives in one, so magically represented in the body of any butterfly, invite us to reflect on the case of this peculiar, delicate creature that disappeared years before. Unfortunately, this is not the only case. With his whole future in front of him, man is capable of building monumental works, but also of destroying astounding, diverse kingdoms that are non-existent only for those who are not able to see worlds that, although minute, were inhabited by creatures from this planet long before any other living being existed. Butterflies are particularly well known for their beautiful shapes and the splendid colors of their wings. Their beauty has made them familiar to humans. But butterflies are only part of a large family that we are not well acquainted with, the insects. The largest and most successful family of animals on planet Earth. Like all living creatures, they too are born, grow, reproduce, and die. Although there are some important differences from all other animals. In the insect world, the form of growth presents surprising variations that culminate in an apparently magical process: metamorphosis. Their sophisticated life cycle, using some resources when young and others when adult, allows many of them to live 3 lives in one. And nature works the miracle. Their ultimate aim, reproduction, is one of the keys to insects' success. However, this is only the end of a long story. A story that, more than any other, should be told from the very beginning. Insects lay their eggs in very different ways depending on the species and the environment they inhabit. With the greatest of care, some prepare the eggs to adhere them to the plant where they will remain until the moment of hatching. Some will even protect the eggs during this time. With stick insects, however, it is normal for the female to launch the eggs without worrying about where they land. The reason for this apparent lack of care is that frequently the eggs of these species have similar shapes and colors to certain kinds of seeds, and so can pass unnoticed by possible enemies. However, in other cases, the female has in her abdomen a structure prepared for a more selective laying process. In this way, she can deposit the eggs in a place where she finds the best environmental conditions for their development. First, she lays them in the substratum, and then she buries them carefully, leaving them out of the reach of predators. Stick insect eggs come in very different shapes, sizes, and colors, but all of them have a hard shell and a protuberance through which the newborn animal will break the egg to reach the outside world. It seems as if one rule among these animals is a certain slowness at all stages of life. Although most insects' eggs hatch quite quickly, these eggs take an extraordinarily long time to mature, sometimes up to 2 years. In some species, the females can lay eggs without being fertilized by the males. In this case, only female young are born. This form of reproduction has the advantage that it allows the family to increase in size very quickly, since no time is lost either looking for a partner or mating. However, it has a downside, which is that the young are born with a poor genetic makeup, and so the species weakens and loses some of its capacity to adapt and evolve. Immediately after birth, these stick insect young climb up the plants that will provide them with food and shelter. As yet, they have no wings or sexual organs, but apart from that, they are a close reflection of how they will be as adults. The young nymphs live their lives free of worries, trusting that they will pass unnoticed in the plants that accommodate them, adapting to their color and shape. Their behavior also varies since they are particularly agile and fast when they move. The reason for such energy is that they imitate a type of ant that is very well respected for its chemical defenses, and they make the most of this close similarity. The small insects have to overcome a curious obstacle in order to develop. Unlike soft-bodied animals, insects have a hard cuticle, which is a kind of external casing that stops them from growing, as if they were enclosed in a tailored suit. They must free themselves from this suit a number of times during their lives in order to continue growing. In these successive molts, a process known as ecdysis, the skin comes loose and is removed, as if it were undressing. While this occurs, the animal takes the chance to inflate itself with air or water, thus making its body grow. All this must be done with a certain urgency, since a new cuticle will soon start to harden around it. The nymphs grow in this way until they reach the last stage of their youth. The shapes of the future wings can be clearly made out. When they reach adulthood, these wings will have developed fully. Caterpillars also grow by means of consecutive molts, but generally they do not enjoy the privilege of camouflage that stick insects do. They are obliged to take advantage of the short time during which the alt suit sets them free. It should not be forgotten that during ecdysis, they are completely unprotected from external dangers. This form of growth is not exclusive to these little animals. Insects must grow by molting their suit in stages, abruptly, unlike the growth of the majority of vertebrates. However, the number of times that each of them undergoes the process during their lives varies greatly, as does the time that each molt lasts, although this is always short. What happens after the last of these is also different, depending on each case. Although one way or another, it is always a step towards the marvelous moment of metamorphosis. In the case of the furniture beetle, the eggs produce larvae, which, with their fragile appearance and soft bodies, are highly vulnerable to any danger. And so they remain hidden throughout their larval life, which is always long, and can even be very prolonged in the case of some species. The image of a grasshopper. It perfectly represents gradual metamorphosis, one of the simplest forms of growth among insects. Gradual metamorphosis normally occurs among the least evolved insects, the group the grasshopper belongs to. The newborn arrives, making the others curious. In the case of grasshoppers, the simplicity of the metamorphosis is clear. In the same way that newborns of some species are very different from their parents, in others, there is a strong similarity. The shape and appearance, food systems, and the organs of the young are very similar to those of the adult. A small grasshopper can be recognized immediately. Getting rid of that made-to-measure suit is always an uncomfortable task. During ecdysis, the young grasshopper will develop inside it the organs and systems of the future adult, but maintaining from the very beginning a very similar appearance to its parents. It will reach adulthood when its wings, if it has any, and its sexual organs have developed after the last stage of ecdysis. Underwater too, we find examples of this kind of development through metamorphosis. Some insects spend their adult lives on land, although their larvae are born and grow underwater. The dragonfly is the best example of this development. The morphology of these aquatic larvae is quite similar to the one the adults will have. The insect can pass through between 8 and 18 stages. Mosquitoes, however, also underwater are an example of another kind of development, complex metamorphosis. Furthermore, mosquitoes have a peculiarity that is unique to their metamorphosis. While the pupae of other species stay still during the time when inside the whole organism is being reorganized, mosquito pupae move continuously. Insects are often distinguished by the fact that their morphologies are particularly different in the young and adult stages. The butterfly and its larval stage of caterpillar are probably the greatest illustration of this difference. Upon entering the world, the first thing the caterpillar does is to eat voraciously. This is its only function in life and its only activity, feeding in order to build up a store of energy, which it will pass on to the butterfly when metamorphosis is complete. In fact, butterflies lay their eggs directly onto the plant that will act as food for the caterpillars. And in this way, the caterpillars do not have to waste time traveling to the food source. In terms of food preferences, there are all kinds, from selective gourmets that only feed on one kind of plant, to others who are not at all fussy with their food. During most of their lives as caterpillars, their behavior is gregarious, giving rise to curious situations, such as all of them eating or resting at the same time. The reason for this frenzy of eating is that during its life as a caterpillar, the animal has to grow quickly to accumulate all the energy it needs. This is not easy if we bear in mind its small digestive capacity and tiny size when born. From when a caterpillar is born until the time it reaches its greatest development, its weight is multiplied thousands of times over. In fact, if a human grew at the same rate as a caterpillar, on reaching adulthood, he would weigh between 6 and 9 tons. However, although one might think otherwise, the daily voracity of thousands of caterpillars does not endanger the natural equilibrium. There are indeed many species known to be plants' most deadly enemies, but on many occasions nature wields its defensive weapons to maintain the biological order. Species that live on dead vegetable materials, such as these beetle larvae, are irreplaceable in the recycling process. They chop up their food with the help of their powerful mouthparts, and they can digest it thanks to the presence of specialized microorganisms in their digestive tracts. These beetle larvae resemble butterfly larvae in their great mobility and insatiable appetites, although unlike them, they feed on decomposing vegetable material. Underwater again with the dragonfly nymph, distinguished among waterborne creatures by the perfection with which their bodies are modeled for the hunt. Always ready, on the lookout for fish, tadpoles, and insects that it hunts down with feline movements. It traps its prey by launching its lower lip like a harpoon, and it holds the prey down with this weapon while devouring it. This is a very accurate tool that allows the animal to get the food it needs to reach adulthood. Under the water, the feeding systems of the young insects are the same as on land. Whether vegetarian or carnivore, the evolution of both aquatic and terrestrial insects is aimed at making the most of the medium they inhabit. After successive molts and reaching the end of the period when they store energy, the insects leave the young phase of their lives and the moment of their transformation into adults approaches. The process begins with the search for the right place to pupate, the home where they will live their second life. This is the task that occupies the caterpillars we usually see at the beginning of the summer. They move quickly, engaged in this hectic search. Some of them choose a place on the ground, spinning cocoons at ground level, where they will become pupae. Others bury themselves in order to undergo that magical transformation into a chrysalis. The adult insect's physical elements start forming within the cocoon. The proboscis of this future butterfly can already be seen in this immobile chrysalis, and it is not for nothing that it is the world's largest known example. Other caterpillars, on the other hand, like to have their home hanging. They attach their bodies to the branches of the plant, where they have spent their lives. For this, they spin a silk cushion and hook themselves to it by the rear, while they attach their foreparts to it by means of a clamp, a strong thread, also made of silk, which they have spun. Once settled in its new home, it starts to shed its old caterpillar skin, its last molt, from which the incipient chrysalis emerges, uncovered. However, the moment of chrysalidation is complex and vitally important, since if the pupa fell to the ground or was left in a bad position, the resulting malformation would be irreversible. That is why, when removing their old skin, they must be extremely careful not to come loose from the plant supporting them. So the pupa is fixed to the plant, awaiting the formation of the organs of the adult that will emerge during the summer. In the case of the swallowtail butterfly, the adult will not emerge until the following spring. That is why its green color will gradually change to brown, in order to provide camouflage when the plants where they live dry up with the arrival of autumn. During this phase of metamorphosis, the chrysalis stays absolutely static, not feeding in any way. While its skin hardens and changes color, a true reorganization of its whole being will take place inside. At the end of the process, this will result in the birth of the butterfly. When the moment arrives, the beetle larva also produces a cocoon, a kind of case to which earth sticks, thus providing camouflage against the surroundings. Within its nymphal chamber, this pupa, which stays completely immobile, starts to experience magical transformations. All the beetle's organs grow and strengthen inside. Little by little, it is possible to make out the forms of the future beetle. Its wings, its head, its abdomen. Slowly and gradually, nature performs the miracle. Finally, the chrysalis starts to open up, its skin tearing with the same silent delicacy that has prevailed throughout the process. Metamorphosis works a wonder. The caterpillar, just a worm to some eyes, becomes one of the animals most admired for its beauty, the butterfly. And the process of metamorphosis ends when the butterfly starts to pump blood towards its wings, making them spread. Caterpillar bodies and butterfly wings, two worlds that are totally different yet which share the same central character. The life cycle in constant renewal. When that moment is over and the wings that are to be so useful during the butterfly's life take on their final shape and hardness, the insect will be ready to fly. Its destination is sexual intercourse, which will restart the beautiful process that best represents the life cycle. Complex metamorphosis is the greatest specialization achieved in the insect world, and it is present in the most evolved species. It is an incredible magic show that nature puts on every day, an incalculable number of times, and in very different ways. The birth of a butterfly is a marvelous thing, but the metamorphosis that occurs in other insects is no less wonderful. The adult beetle starts out on life without wasting time, as if the long wait inside the pupa had made it impatient, and it was in a hurry to get started on this last essential part of its life. The wonder that is complex metamorphosis, and the spectacular contrast between the unpleasant appearance of the larva and the beautiful colors of the adult insect. It is equally curious that animals which, when young, feed on dead material, as adults drink the nectar of flowers. The dragonfly has ended its youthful development and is preparing to fly, taking on a new appearance and coloration. It could be said that it is a different animal, now surprisingly adapted to life in the air, where it will become a great predator with the same success it had in its previous stage underwater. The mosquito has also just emerged and is ready to begin its new life. Once the pupa has been abandoned, it settles on the surface of the water, waiting patiently for its new suit to dry, while it prepares to make summer nights a misery for human beings. Feeding in order to live is perhaps the oldest fact in the Earth's history, a need that is common to all living creatures, and which insects also share in their adult life. However, how many more surprises await us as we look even closer at the fascinating world of how insects feed? Among adults, there are innumerable species that choose an exclusively vegetarian diet, which does not prevent them from having different and very often select feeding habits. one way or another, and depending on the case, the leaves, trunks, roots, flowers, seeds, and fruit of all kinds of plants can form part of this immense larder that nature has made available for insects. And if the food is diverse, then the forms of eating are even more so. Each of the hundreds of thousands of different species of insect has its own way of searching for food. Sipping the nectar from flowers is one of the most common. Some insects do so by introducing their mouthpieces, adapted for sucking into the flower. The friendly relationship that they enjoy seems to be illustrated by the delicacy with which some insects feed on the flowers. They don't know it, but they are enjoying a banquet their host has invited them to in exchange for a favor, without which the plant could not reproduce. By searching for food, insects play a crucial role in the pollination of flowers, and that is why they are necessary for reproduction. Although there are also curious cases of opportunism, such as this bumblebee. It is not that this insect refuses to pollinate the plant. In fact, it sometimes does so, but its impatience can lead it to eat from the base of the flower, and so it obtains the nectar without transporting the pollen in exchange. However, the bumblebee's case is an exception. The most common case is for insects and plants to need each other. In fact, there are cases of plants which, when moved away from their natural habitat, die without being able to reproduce due to the lack of the insects that pollinated them in their natural environment. Of course, today, technology is able to solve that problem, but even so, nature continues to prefer her own methods. The spectacular colors normally shown by flowers have a function that is more than simply to look good. Actually, these colors attract the pollinating insect by providing a seductive destination. The shapes of flowers are often in designs that allow the insects to land on them without problems. This is another of nature's techniques to facilitate pollination. In accordance with their elegant appearance and delicate manners, butterflies have transformed their mouthpieces into their proboscis, a kind of long trunk that is rolled up when the animal is not eating and which is unrolled when the creature wants to reach the nectar. Other insects have gone as far as lengthening their own heads so that they have a beak strong enough to go through the shell of the chosen nut in order to reach the food inside. Some carnivores have developed a stiletto. The system is basically the same, only the type of food varies. With it, they puncture the victim alive and suck it until it is completely empty. Certainly, carnivorous insects are very specialized animals. All their organs and systems are prepared to feed on living creatures. The mantis's mandibles carry out a very precise task. This image illustrates better than any other the synchronization developed by organs located in insects' heads. The large size of its eyes enables it to locate its prey. The precision of its movements to stalk them and capture them. Its legs, which are sharp and have spines, to hold them, and its implacable jaws filled with teeth to cut them up and devour them. Without doubt, the sensory organs developed by predators are much more complex than those of vegetarians and their conduct much more elaborate. Mantis and dragonfly, two specimens that reveal nature's ability to create insects that are conceived exclusively for hunting. Beneath the water, the food of aquatic insects is basically similar to that of land insects, the only difference being those marked by the environment to which the former have learned to adapt. This animal, the largest aquatic beetle in Europe, feeds off algae and aquatic plants. When it is time to feed, the water scorpion captures and holds the invertebrates off which it feeds in its forelegs, using the system of stinging and sucking the victim. When food is scarce, as occurs when the pools dry up in summer, it may even practice cannibalism. This is the case of the backswimmers, called so due to the way in which they move using their long back legs as oars to swim just below the surface of the water. When an insect falls into the water, its light weight causes vibrations that are captured by the predator, which immediately pounces on its prey. Its hunger is satiated. The story is repeated over and over again, but there are times when this is not so easy. Some victims fight for their survival. In that case, a fight to the death takes place in which the hunter is always at an advantage. If its prey puts up a fight, the predator just waits for it to drown. An inhabitant of the river backwaters, which it occupies in large colonies, the water strider have become accustomed to living on the water, thanks to the surface tension and the fact that the insect's weight has diminished and its legs, which have a cushion of fat, have been considerably lengthened. This way they can cover a large radius and float on the thin surface area. They feed off insects that accidentally fall into the water. The vibrations allow them to locate their prey. They sting the victim and suck out the liquid while using their forelegs to grasp it. The water measurer is a relative of the water strider. It floats on the water using the same technique as the water strider, but prefers the vegetation that floats on the surface. Apparently, apart from the secret of knowing how to float on the water, both insects are familiar with peacefully coexisting in the habitat in which they live. Contrasts in nature. Contrast between the carnivorous voracity of the predator and the peacefulness of a vegetarian meal. These beetles feed off dead matter and excrements, thereby contributing to the constant regeneration and enriching of soil nutrients. The ground over which they pass is cleaned and the vegetation can grow back. They are actually true recycling machines and essential in the vital process created by nature. The existence of these beings with their unattractive eating habits is extremely fortunate for the biological order. To feed, all insects, both vegetarian and carnivorous, need the help of their feelers, legs, and their eyes. They are, without a doubt, aware of the importance of all these organs in detecting and recognizing which plants or animals are appropriate for satiating their appetite without any risk. For that reason, they all maintain scrupulous levels of hygiene. All insects have adapted their bodies in such an amazing and spectacular way to ensure the survival of their species. And each one of these adaptations has an ultimate objective that is common to all: reproduction. Finding a mate, a common act in all species, and one which, although appearing simple, conceals many different ways of seduction and physical peculiarities. An enormously diverse series of techniques that comprises what is without a doubt the most interesting type of sexuality on the whole planet. Flirtation between the males and females, a rite that is as ancient as the earth itself, which only the hermaphrodite species can afford to do without. However, since this is a very rare case in insects, they must make great efforts to find a mate. Nature knows the importance of the encounter between the sexes and has developed a wide range of weapons of seduction in order to make it easier, and, when necessary, to shorten it, since many insects exist that live for only a few hours during their adult life. In the spring, the time when the environmental conditions are ideal, the exercise of seduction is increased. Of course, this flashy display has only one ultimate objective: copulation. In this case, the male and female look similar, but this is not always the case. In the universe of beetles, the rules of seduction before mating are as diverse as they are surprising, in many cases. The female sometimes gives off a penetrating odor that may attract thousands of males at one time. The physical differences between males and females from the same species are important in many stages of sexual behavior among beetles and are not governed by any particular rule, but some may affect any part of the morphology of the male or the female. The amorous encounter may bring a few surprises. The female does not have the protuberance that the male sports in the form of a spectacular horn. In fact, they could be considered as different animals, and yet that physical difference plays a very important role. As a general rule, the protuberances and horns on many male beetles are used for the combats that often take place during the mating season. These combats fulfill the objective of improving and perpetuating the continuity of the species. The strongest beetle will mate with the female and transmit its force to its issue. The males of some species may find a mate at a long distance thanks to their inordinately large feelers. They use them to capture the odorous calls emitted by the females during the phase prior to mating. The amorous encounter between grasshoppers is quite surprising. Most male grasshoppers are smaller than the females. This often makes it necessary for them to contort their abdomens to copulate with their female companions. An extremely uncomfortable posture, especially if it is considered that some grasshoppers copulate for several days and can even search for food without interrupting sexual intercourse. There may also be different phases of behavior when copulating in addition to purely physical ones. This grasshopper uses its wings to approach the female. The female is much more passive at the time of making the approach. Perhaps this is because of her tendency to use her tiny wings as little as possible, due to their lack of development, making it impossible for them to be used for flight. The most beautiful animals of all insects, maintaining and even improving their elegance at the time of copulating. Male and female show off their delicate bodies. The male pumps sperm into his female companion for many minutes to fertilize her. The union of two butterflies is a symbolic illustration of the importance of reproduction. It's the last moment in the life of an insect. For at that particular moment, they are risking their lives. During copulation, butterflies are at the mercy of their predators. In the stick insects, the differences are also quite evident. The females of this species are larger and have lost their power to fly, since due to their particular mating rite, this is not necessary. The female emits certain chemical substances that attract the males, which fly over long distances to their female companions. The encounter of the sexes is totally guaranteed. These animals may copulate for hours and even up to 3 weeks. During that time, the tiny winged male literally hangs from the body of its mate. The The sexual behavior of the mantis, a universal legend about which the whole truth is by no means known. The male cautiously approaches the female, which is busy devouring her prey, and suddenly pounces on her. With a gentle movement that is quite uncharacteristic of these implacable predators, he brings his abdomen close to that of the female, with the intention of copulating. But the copulation rite of the mantis immediately takes on the character that has made it so famous. In 1 out of every 5 sexual acts, the male is devoured by the female. She starts by eating the head, thereby eliminating the nervous centers that inhibit copulation, and that way achieving a faster transfer of sperm. In these cases, the male feeds the female, which this time may decide not to eat her companion. The change from a young insect to an adult one is quite different from that of other animals. Many species must overcome a series of obstacles and dangers during their 3 lives in one. The growth processes are so amazing that they constitute a world of unexpected surprises in themselves, and also a lesson about the quiet and age-old struggle of these tiny beings to survive. The adult butterfly is now ready to fly in search of a mate, thereby ending the cycle that will start again with the budding of a new life. Beauty can be found in the most unlikely places. Beetles can have the most spectacular coloration, their polished elytra rich enough to challenge even the most imaginative creators. Insects, the most numerous, strange and diverse group of living creatures inhabiting Earth. Armored, flying, digging, predatory, solitary or communal. The same name is used for them all, although the simple formula of head, thorax and abdomen, together with their flight system, covers an almost infinite variety of combinations. Thousands of years after their ancestors arose from the sea, insects conquered the land. And once they had done that, they miraculously obtained wings to take to the skies. The air, the only place without borders, is the domain that has been, since the earliest times, a focus for mankind. It was conquered by insects thanks to the magical gift of flight. This ability, developed over the course of their evolution, allowed insects to move into many different habitats inaccessible to other animals. Some did not manage to achieve the power of flight, but the majority developed a physical quality that they alone were to possess for 100 million years. wings. The seeds of these creatures' success were planted even before this. After the first forms of life moved from sea to land, nature brought about the development of hundreds of morphologies, all channeled towards winning the struggle for adaptation to the different environments. This was the key to their biological success. Flight allowed them to move around, to reach new frontiers and conquer every spot on Earth. In the Carboniferous period more than 300 million years ago, there were already winged insects that, in the case of the dragonfly, measured up to 75 centimeters in length. Over time, all species changed and diversified the shapes, sizes, and functions of their wings. The adaptation to flight sculpted the body of the insects, making them lighter and more aerodynamic. Of all the morphologies created by the diversification of life, the most successful was to be that of the beetle. An infinite number of creatures conquering every imaginable habitat, evolving to adapt to them, even ready to fly, and also to return to their ancestral home under the water. The very same capacity for adaptation that allowed these animals to be the first to colonize the land also made it possible for them to conquer the water. Water, closely linked to the fate of the planet, not only as the origin of the first forms of life, but also as the setting of countless epic journeys, such as its silent and ancestral conquest by these tiny creatures. The conquest of water was possible thanks to incredible processes of adaptation, such as those of the water scorpion. To take in air, it developed a long tube that is so unlike the terrible weapon of its distant terrestrial relative. This is a kind of periscope made up of two hairs which, when joined, form a tube. It uses this to breathe as it cautiously peeps out of its refuge, without leaving the mud that shelters it. Another curious adaptation to the aquatic environment: mosquito larvae. They adjusted to life upside down, breathing through a tube at the end of the abdomen. Temporary bodies of water became home to many species, obliged to adapt to the changing nature of their habitat. Other species adapted to the pure waters of mountain streams, species that would not be able to live in a polluted environment. 250 million years ago, stoneflies had colonized every continent except Antarctica. From sea level to Himalayan altitudes, their waterborne larvae developed laminar surfaces for breathing which work like gills. With rhythmic speed, as if they wanted to compete with the movement of the water surrounding them, they moved the blades located on both sides of the abdomen in order to capture more oxygen from the water. Their flat bodies seem to have been modeled by nature to stop the current from carrying them away. However, their case is not unique. This other species also developed a useful hydrodynamic shape, although it has to resort to another system to breathe. Since its gills do not have the power of movement, it is the animal itself that moves them, like a disciplined athlete carrying out a strange gymnastic exercise. Many insects adapted to the water, keeping their form of respiration unchanged from their terrestrial origin. So they developed strategies aimed at obtaining and renewing air through their tracheas, all the time ensuring that water did not enter them. For this, they need to go to the surface. This is the case with water beetles. They have a space under their wings that can be filled with air, a little like a diver's air tank. When this reserve finishes, they have to fill their tanks again at the surface. Once there, they open the hatch located at the ends of their bodies and they take in the air they need, while also secreting oily substances that prevent water from entering. Once this operation is complete, they submerge once again. The shores of lakes and ponds have been colonized by a great number of different insects that have built true underwater cities. To breathe, this silver beetle goes to the surface with its head up and breaks the surface of the water with its antenna, forming a channel to fill its tanks with air. This is one more unique example of adaptation to the water environment. The insect's body is surrounded by air, adjusting to each part like a second skin and creating a surprising effect. It gives the creature an intense silver color. After storing air, it is essential for it to go back to the subaquatic world, where the silver shade of the insect symbolizes the fact that air is necessary for life underwater too. The struggle to adapt to and settle in other places on Earth has favored diversity, to the point where two or more different species originate from a single one. Insects of the same kind, physically separate and subject to the variations of the weather conditions, gradually change their morphology, resulting in two different species. In some cases, this difference is the result of geographic isolation. The best example of diversity is in the heart of tropical rainforests. There, in an area equivalent to half a football pitch, 4,000 different species were identified. And we are only talking about beetles. Today it is thought that there are around 200 million insects for every living person on the planet. Considering this piece of information, it seems clear that insects deserve more attention from human beings. But what is the reason for such extraordinary success? Insects have some morphological features that are so effective they could be considered true gifts from nature. The first of these gifts is the exoskeleton, an external skeleton that insulates the insect's body and allows it to survive in every possible habitat. Its small size also helps, since it allows the insect to settle in places forbidden to other larger animals. The external skeleton is the key to insect success. It is an articulated shell that covers the whole body and effectively protects its fragile organism, while allowing the insect to move. The external skeleton is made of chitin, a material that is both hard and light, and it also carries out other basic functions for the survival of these animals, such as protecting them against injuries and preventing water loss. Insulated from the environment by their cuirass, they can adapt to life in the ice of the Arctic and withstand the desert sun. Depending on the species and its needs, the external skeleton has different characteristics, especially in terms of its hardness. The physical appearance of these tiny creatures is an indication of their great diversity, and it reveals itself in a multitude of unimaginable shapes, colors, and designs. Mankind has at hand an immense range of ingenious solutions that he can learn from when searching for answers to his own design problems in order to meet human needs better. The variety of their morphologies means that occasionally it can be a difficult task to identify the insect's body parts, head, thorax, or abdomen. The head is the location of the basic sensory organs. The eyes and the antennae are the animal's computer sensor, providing the information needed for it to interact with its surroundings. The eye's strange lack of expressiveness is something that strikes us about insects' heads. These are eyes made up of light-sensitive units that can be found in groups varying greatly in number, up to almost 30,000. Certain flying insects, such as butterflies, require visual effectiveness that, in the majority of cases, is denied to most other insects. The compound eyes of butterflies are well developed enough to locate food and move towards it. Visual effectiveness, as well as the size and shape of the eyes, is very similar among the different species of butterfly, although they may have very different colorations. The eyes of some predatory insects, like this dragonfly, have developed enormously in order to improve vision during flight. In fact, they can even join at the top of the creature's head, providing a magnificent 300 degrees of vision. Head, thorax, and abdomen, a simple formula exemplified in thousands of different designs, each one more ingenious than the next. In many cases, insects have 2 pairs of wings, but always 3 pairs of legs. The adaptations and modifications of their bodies for movement on land are so numerous that practically the only thing that insects have in common is the number of legs. This is a rule that caterpillars only appear to contradict. The first 3 pairs are true legs, the others are false, simply helping the insect to support itself and move around the plant on which it is feeding. This great jump, which proportionally speaking no human being could imitate, is possible thanks to the grasshopper's rear legs, a powerful mechanism adapted for jumping. The variety of habits in beetles has favored a wide range of changes to their legs based on a basic model. Each of the legs of these insects is a set of articulated cylinders that has great mobility. The burying beetle lives up to its name. It uses its shovel-shaped 4 tibia, applying its powerful muscles and becoming an ideal drilling machine. A number of variants have developed in the underwater kingdom. Here the beetles' bodies are in the shape of a boat, and their legs have acquired the functions of specialized fins. In the case of other insects, their legs work just like oars. Movement in this medium is as effective as on dry land. However, in terms of resources for movement, insects are not simply limited to their legs. Symbolized by the rhythm of the unfolding of butterflies' wings, a new world of possibilities opens up to insects with the power of flight. The diversity presented by insects' wings can be classified into just two flight systems. In the first, the insects beat the two pairs of wings independently. These are the least evolved species. In the second, they beat both pairs of wings synchronically and at speeds that are often beyond the capacity of the human eye. It is precisely the fact that the wings have a synchronized beat that produces the insect's well-known buzz. The second type of flight is more common and the one used by the most evolved species. However, both types of flight have one common characteristic: the large amount of energy needed to carry them out. Insects obtain this energy from two sources: the food they take in and the oxygen they breathe, which allows the combustion of reserves. Of course, the wings are essentially used for flying, but flight is something that can materialize in many forms, such as the modifications of the basic model of two pairs of membranous wings. This primitive formula has mainly resulted in slow, weak flight, with the insect almost being carried along by the wind. Membranous wings, two pairs of fine sheets sustained by a network made up of nerves. As if there were hinges, the membranous wings of some species have a very complex longitudinal and transverse nervation. The larger the surface of the wings, the less evolved the insect. Some species make short, imprecise flights, while others fly with impressive agility and speed. Other variants arose from this basic model, and so there are many species that present different types of membranous wings. However, this system can also act to develop very effective flight abilities, like the one that characterizes this group of insects. When they are resting, damselflies fold their wings into a vertical position above their bodies. This is what differentiates them from dragonflies. It might be thought that the system of beating the two pairs of wings independently is due to a lack of evolutionary capacity. However, the species of this group have kept the system precisely for its effectiveness, which allows them to hunt, mate, and even lay their eggs while in the air. Membranous wings are also a characteristic of Hemiptera, wasps, bees, bumblebees, and ants. Approximately 145,000 species are known. Two pairs of small yet enormously effective wings joined together by hooks during flight so that they work together as a single pair. All these species in this group are excellent flying creatures, although ants are the exception that proves the rule. Their wings are temporary, and they only have them when founding new colonies. The group of dipterians, flies, horseflies, mosquitoes includes those insects that are most bothersome to human beings. There are almost 85,000 species. Their back wings have undergone a curious transformation and have become a kind of drumstick called hartres, full of blood and with nerve endings that allow them to keep their balance during flight while informing the insect about position, direction, and air currents. In some species, the result of such meticulous sophistications is a flying ability that is so effective that it makes us think of some insects, like this mosquito, as pilots preparing to take off for some remote place. It is with good reason that it is one of the animals whose wings are most specialized for flight. Evolution has created other variants to the concept of two pairs of wings, such as in the case of the grasshopper. The surface area of the first pair has been reduced, and they have also been hardened to protect the second pair when they are resting and act as stabilizing planes when the grasshopper is moving through the air. Under the wings are the different colorations and transparencies of the second pair, the one that is really made for flying. That second pair is the one grasshoppers use to increase their capacity for movement, allowing it to make jumps and even fly. But this kind of movement can become unnecessary in the high and rugged mountain ranges. There, many insects live and evolve isolated from neighboring ecosystems. These islands on land tend to be rich in natural resources, and the presence of predators is limited. This allows for a progressive reduction in the wings, which are simply unnecessary due to the fact that there is no need to flee or migrate in search of food. The uselessness of the wings became more and more evident until nature, in its mission to adapt the animal's body to its environment, eliminated them altogether. It is this mission that is behind all of the adaptations in the insect world. For this reason, some species of cockroach do not fly, and others with their wizened wings do so clumsily and have limited autonomy. Sometimes the first pair of wings only partially hardens, and they can be used to protect the second pair, which is kept in a membranous state. That is the case with many species of bug. These insects, although poor flyers, have their flight requirements perfectly satisfied, these practically amounting to moving to where food is located. In fact, some of these species have completely lost the ability to fly, as they do not need to move about because they act as parasites. Beetles, members of the Coleopteran group with more than 300,000 known species, owe part of their extraordinary biological success precisely to the complete hardening of that first pair of wings, or elytra. The elytra close hermetically over the second pair that is thereby protected inside a highly resistant sheath. The elytra are said to have a variety of possible uses during flight. They can, for example, stay open and immobile during the trajectory of flight, thereby acting as planes of equilibrium, whilst the second pair of wings is responsible for providing propulsion. Others keep the elytra closed during flight. First, they verify that the elytra are functioning correctly, and they extend their antennae to check the air currents. But in spite of that technical precision, its ability to fly is in line with its robust and heavy appearance. Its flights tend to be short and slow. Specific environmental conditions have come together over the passage of time and led to the complete fusing of the elytra in some species. In these cases, the sheath's only purpose is to provide sturdy protection for the animal's body. However, when it comes to butterflies, wings reach their maximum expression of elegance and beauty. The Lepidoptera. There are approximately 200,000 known species that fly over the ground with those two pairs of wings, the physical attribute that makes them most recognizable. Nature, as if conscious of the importance of beauty, has created an almost infinite variety of combinations in butterfly wings. The cause of the butterfly's enormous capacity for conquest and adaptation appears to be quite clearly down to that most distinctive physical feature, the wings. The image of the wings seems so familiar that only one characteristic surprises us: their large size in relation to the body. However, the insect's overall dimensions do not follow any strict rules. An undefined space between our fingers represents the dimensions that man normally attributes to the butterfly. The diversity is especially evident in the spectrum of different dimensions that these insects have. The average size of moths is just a few centimeters, but some species barely reach a few millimeters in width. The same can be said about other butterflies. In some cases, the differences in size are truly spectacular, especially if you consider that you could be talking about members of the same species. However, the size difference does not prevent all of their bodies from sharing some common characteristics. The wings are the most eye-catching part of their body. However, that characteristic is not only distinctive because of its attractive appearance, it also constitutes the highest grade of specialization achieved by the coloration of insects. Triangular wings supported by a network of veins that give them solidity and consistency for flight. The beautiful colors of the wings are due to a combination of flattened scales that can be up to 90,000 in number. They are perfectly superimposed one over the other, as if they were miniature tiles. However, the presence of the scales is not only for aesthetic reasons. They are also used by the butterfly as efficient indicators during flight. In some cases, the precise distribution of these scales fulfills the function of keeping the brain informed of the conditions under which the insect is flying. The countless forms that butterfly wings can take entail extensive possibilities for visual language. Nobody can deny that they are in fact a never-ending spectacle. Quite apart from the unquestionably striking aesthetic outcome, the ample variety of wing shapes has the function of allowing the members of the different species to recognize each other, thereby avoiding erroneous copulations. Sometimes the colorfulness they display cannot be appreciated at first sight. It is as if the insect hides the secret of its beauty, keeping it concealed and only showing it off during specific moments of the day. Some insects are capable of refracting the light that hits their scales thanks to the structure of their pigments. The light is then dispersed over the wings, drawing pretty flashes of mother-of-pearl that appear to prove that there are no limits or boundaries. The change in the incidence of light on the colors can become a truly hypnotic spectacle. The wings of the butterfly contain so many secrets, so many perfect forms of adaptation to different environments, that one might conclude that its aesthetic beauty is the least important factor. A thought that is nevertheless difficult to accept when you take in their beauty. In the beetle kingdom, we can find attributes that are no less surprising. The spectacular development of the horns in some species gives the male a truly intimidating appearance. And makes for a curious contrast with the Pacific female, who dedicates herself exclusively to the task of procreation. The sexual dimorphism can become so pronounced that they appear to be insects of different species. There are physical differences between males and females whose purpose lies in the amorous engagement. The beetle's horns are not only used in battle. On many occasions, such intimidating protuberances can fulfill a seductive function prior to copulation. It is normal for the females to select the males with the largest attributes, female and male both from the same species. This fact is not only applicable to the heads and thorax of the species. In some species, it is the legs of the males that grow to disproportionate levels. The purpose of this disproportionate difference is not capricious or coincidental. The long legs are used by the male to mount the female more firmly during the act of copulation. The reason is therefore the one initially pursued: optimal copulation, guaranteed reproduction. Exaggerated disproportion can also appear in the hind legs. The modification made by the insect does not affect the length of the legs, rather it makes them very wide. The long and muscular legs of this beetle would be the envy of any athlete. Nevertheless, it is incapable of jumping. Sexual attraction is once more the purpose of the deformity. Methods of courtship and seduction that are nevertheless not always based on demonstrations of power. Sometimes sexual dimorphism is so pronounced that the jaws of the male can cover the entire body of the female of his species. Jaws that are bigger than the male's own body, jaws that are imperceptible on the head of the female of the same species. The differences between male and female are the best symbol of the unlimited world of prodigious insect designs. In butterflies, these differences are expressed through the characteristic beauty of those insects, essentially in the coloration of the wings. In general, it is the males that display bright colors, which they shake in a showy way, during the flights they use to attract the female, a spectacular way of drawing attention which has a lot to do with the survival of the species. For that reason, the females display duller colors. Inevitably, they will have a better chance of going unnoticed to the eyes of a predator. Another form of dimorphism is seen in the antennae of the males of some butterflies. They are capable of detecting the aromatic scent emitted by females to attract them from kilometers away. That is the reason for the pronounced development of its feathery antennae, a phenomenon that is very common in nocturnal butterflies. The opposite case is less common, where the males irresistibly attract the females thanks to the substance they emit from the hairy glands on their wings. All of the world's cultures have used and been enriched by the image of the insect. The Maya, one of the richest and oldest civilizations in the world. The many objects that make up their legacy are rich in iconographic references to insects, towards which this mythical culture felt a fascinated veneration that is shown to be completely justified by the appearance of some beetles, whose shapes and colors make them the center of countless legends. The Egyptians, holders of scientific secrets that have not yet been deciphered today, claimed that certain beetles had supernatural powers, considering them to be symbols of immortality and the forces that guide the stars. All of this was probably due to their ignorance of metamorphosis, an ignorance that led them to dream up incredible fantasies. A text from the era read, "The beetle sinks its ball into the earth, where it remains hidden for 28 days. On the 29th day, which the insect recognizes as the one the moon joins with the sun, it opens that ball, and beetles emerge from it." A threatening phrase very often used in the so-called holy book of Christian culture begins, "Like a plague of locusts, the divine lightning will strike the godless, the non-believers, and the violent." It is therefore not surprising that over the centuries, insects have fed the imagination and sometimes the superstitions of man. The wars of medieval Europe: blood, death, and fire. Fire that the ignorant German peasants blamed on the beautiful, and in this case also innocent, stag beetles, insects that, according to legend, carried burning sticks in their powerful jaws that allowed them to light up the night. Insects, tireless providers of encouragement to man's capacity to dream up legends and myths. A capacity that manifests itself in ways as diverse as Renaissance art and popular cartoon characters. They have always inspired an endless number of stories, myths, and legends. If anyone thinks this claim is exaggerated, they only have to search their childhood memories for some forgotten story. Hard-working ants, or a cicada that, exhausted and alone after having spent its fortune, enters an unsuspected world of solidarity. The myriad and spectacular colors of butterflies have inspired artists and painters across the ages. They say that in ancient times a tailor was commissioned to create the most beautiful dress ever made, which was to be worn by the daughter of a great Chinese warrior on her wedding day. The tailor spent whole nights trying to find ways to achieve this task. They say that he finally found the solution on the last day allowed to him When exasperated by the lack of inspiration, his eyes alighted on a butterfly that rested on his work table and spread its wings. The image of a butterfly today transcends time and space to bring us back to that Chinese tailor and the most beautiful dress ever imagined. Which reminds us of a great British entomologist and writer who had a great knowledge of the many stories that make up the 1001 Nights. He believed that the secret of Shahrazad's beauty was in her eyes. It was said that she powered her eyelashes with the dust from the wings of a butterfly that was caught in the mating season, which turned the soft fluttering of her lashes into a silent and irresistible seduction. Like a lighthouse on the edge of the earth, a butterfly's wings evoke age-old memories. Whether based on truth or imagination, legends often include the fascinating figure of certain insects. Given the profusion of insects in our myths and legends, it is not surprising that our imagination continues to be dazzled by them. Creatures that sometimes look like jewels, precious stones shaped by a visionary craftsman determined to seek prodigious new forms of beauty. There are also species that send out their own light thanks to the peculiar structure of the superficial layers of their armor, which break up and modify beams of light, producing fascinating flashes of color. It is interesting to note that many insects appear to be sculpted by hand. In a sense, you could say that is precisely what they are. The sculptor was nature itself, working with the tools of evolution to perfect its creation over the ages. Without a doubt, nature has outdone itself with the design of some beetles, their elytra crowned with dazzling metallic sheens. The sight of a ladybird walking along the leaf of a plant just before it flaps its little wings to take flight. The fascination produced by seeing the myriad colors of a butterfly floating among flowers of many colors. The image of a grasshopper about to launch off in its inimitable style. Who among us does not have distant memories of such wonders seen through the eyes of a child, keen for greater knowledge that it is not yet equipped to acquire? Images from the past, moments that bring us back to our own childhood, and a world view that perceived insects as a completely natural part of everyday life in a way that seems lost to us today, being no more than a memory. Nature, as if aware of mankind's desire to collect and compare, has written a chapter on record breakers. The name of this beetle, Titan, seems completely justified. It is the biggest in the world and can reach a length of 20 centimeters. The Goliath beetle, meanwhile, is the heaviest, being able to reach a weight of up to 100 grams. Seeing it on the weighing scales, we have to ask ourselves if insects really are ugly. Is the problem in the eye of the human beholder, which is incapable of seeing the richness hidden inside? So many and varied life forms could not but fail to awaken our scientific interest. It is hard to imagine the countless times that human intelligence was put to the test to try to find new scientific names for these creatures. The insect universe reveals new unknown species to us with every new sunrise. It could be said that the designs, colors, and varieties of beauty applied by nature in the insect universe are prodigious and infinite. It is humbling to think that the planet could go on without mankind, but not without insects. To see the land and seas from above, to be able to conquer the skies, to fly. If we consider the feats that insects can accomplish, we can't but envy these abilities. Envy them and close our eyes to imagine, for as long as our imagination allows us to, that we too have wings and are free to explore the space beyond the sky.